Hello, you amazing, awesome performance ensemble peeps and fans of performance ensemble. We're so glad that you are with us. We're going to be talking certainly about performance and anything else that comes to mind because, you know, life happens. And so we're going to respond to it and think about it. And I think all the things that if you've watched this show for any length of time, you recognize that, you know, the more authentic we become, the more we're able to participate in life fully. And so I think that applies to performance ensemble and life in general. So we're going to talk about all those kinds of things. So thank you so much for tuning in, for being with us. I am one of three. I'm one of the trifecta of hosts, if you will. My name is Jefferson Denham.
I'm Samantha Garcia.
And I am finally not Jefferson Denham because penis.
And I'm so glad you're there. All of you, all the three of us here, and all of you watching. So we're going to start off with something we were just talking a little bit before we started recording about, and I'm going to extrapolate a little bit because we were talking about performance in general, and let's just face it, performance is not happening. Did you guys see there was yet another announcement from Broadway? They're shut down at least through next summer, I guess. And do you know, I mean, if you know performers, our family happens to know performers, and it is heartbreaking because some of them were just cast on a Broadway show or an off-Broadway show or a touring company, and now nothing. And so that's heartbreaking. And
I feel like it's so painful for every artist right now.
And I know that we are trying to make the most of the situation. That's why we're doing this, is to try to find ways of creative expression given the parameters of coronavirus. So, but it doesn't stop us from mourning the fact that performance is shut down in a big, big way. And that includes performance ensemble at CSUN. And so let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the aspects of, and maybe this manifests itself in the kinds of performances that are not only that you do live, but also what you record, the idea of making mistakes, specifically making mistakes on stage or when the camera's on or when it's time to perform. So let me start off with that. Sam, have you ever had a moment where, I know you were in show choir and performance ensemble and whatnot, was there ever a moment where that just sticks out in your mind where something went awry and you're like, okay, this is not the way we planned it?
I'm laughing because I do have an answer for that. And it was in show choir particularly. I've performed in many other ways, but this particular show choir blooper my friends will never let me hear the end of it. It's amazing. So we had we had a school performance on our stage in our auditorium at school. And we had these costumes, uniform costumes that were made by the show choir teacher's wife. And, you know, they're all perfect, custom to us. They're handmade. And I've always had an issue with costumes before. For some reason, I always have like a costume issue. But during one of the performances, we're singing and dancing. I think it was a medley of 80 songs or something. And I was just going dancing, and my skirt just pops open, and it's just if I wasn't holding it, it would just fall down. So for a little bit, I was like, the show must go on. So I held my skirt and I was dancing while holding it so it doesn't fall down. And then there came a point where I just had to run off stage. and this is one of just many bloopers I've had on stage. Like, I'm a clumsy person, but I definitely feel like, as embarrassing, I think it's more funny than embarrassing, but
right.
There's just so much we're going to unpack more later about how we can learn from these things. But when I think about it, there's so much of me that was made in those moments.
That's a really good observation, because what those impacts on our character and our memories and you know, our perspectives of life can be profound. But I thought at least you didn't have a Janet Jackson moment where your boobs popped out. But
Oh yeah, almost.
or is there another story?
Oh, you know what? Almost. There was a top half situation at one point. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just
Me
almost.
too.
Here for you
Okay.
all.
So Fernando, for
Go on,
any
babe.
of the times when you've, you know, because you usually, knowing you, you write these amazing monologues, but they're dense and they're long. And I remember you like pacing in the hallway going mumble, mumble,
Me
mumble.
too.
Why did I do this to myself? Mumble, mumble. So I think you have a story to tell too, where I'm going to prompt it. I'm trying not to give too much away, but was there a performance where you forgot the monologue and you just did something else?
Yeah, I don't know how you remember that. Yeah, I actually have two examples for you guys, and I want to say them both because they're both really funny. But yeah, the one that you're talking about is the very first time the first time I ever performed with PE actually. And so at the time I didn't write the way that you guys knew how I wrote, right? Like I wrote completely different. I hadn't discovered this sort of like performative monologue writing and performance style. So I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like writing things and it kind of sucked, honestly. Or at least I felt like it wasn't adequate, right? Like it wasn't, I could have done better. But I mean, I guess then again, we can always do better. But I wrote something and we were performing in the theater. And off to the side, there's a room where all performers can go into. It's the green room, right? And so in the green room, you can just like sit down, relax, have a drink.
Okay, can I stop you? And just for anybody who's watching who's not in PE or performance, but as a fan, could you just describe, I know this is very elementary, but what is a green room?
The green room is just, I guess the best way to think of it is like the resting room for performers where they like stand by before moving on to the next piece. But yeah, it's just like a resting room or an in-between room. Like if you're not on stage, that's where you go off so that you're not behind the curtains or anything. Yeah, and so like I was in the green room, and this green room specifically had a TV that was recording everything that was happening on stage, so you can tell when it was your cue. So like even if you forgot your cue, you already know anyways just by looking at it. And I was one of the last performers because they sort of used me as a sort of a threading character, right? So like I was just like in every piece somehow, but not really having any lines until it was my piece. And I wrote this thing on coping with depression because like that's just something that I wanted to talk about, and I was struggling a lot that semester. It was like when I first transferred from community college and I was just struggling academically, right? So I wrote this whole thing. It wasn't that long, it was like a paragraph long. I went on stage and my face turned completely red and I forgot every single one of my lines.
Oh no.
Couldn't remember for the life of me, and I didn't even do that thing where honestly it must have like been like 10-15 seconds, but that felt like an eternity for me where I was just like
Yeah.
I was like frozen and I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do. And it was interesting because like I was also tied up to chains, like real chains, and people behind the curtains were pulling it because that's part of the performance. And so I just had to make up lines, and it sucked for them too because like they lost their cues because I forgot my lines. And I was just like making things up, and at some point I just like I think they remembered that the cue to end my piece was me falling on my knees because they could hear it, right? And so at some point I just gave up and I like threw myself on my knees and I'm like, whatever. I did my best. I made up lines on the spot. Um, it was probably one of the most I don't know. I don't even know how to describe that experience. I felt like I was lost in space and time didn't exist and I just wanted to not, like that's what it was. And there's like a clip of me delivering some lines and I like that clip, but every time I think about that show, I just like always run away because I'm like, I don't talk about it. Like that doesn't exist anymore.
I'm sorry, but it's
I'm
because
sorry.
it's because we know this feeling, and it is
Yes.
a horrible feeling because you rehearse and you rehearse and you rehearse and you want it to go so well for the audience's sake, right? And,
Oh,
then,
yeah.
and then everything goes to hell. And you're like,
All your hard work,
oh
all
my
those
God.
the semester, like the
Yeah.
Oh, that's sort of like, and everyone backstage trying to pick up their cue. Oh my God. All
Yeah,
right.
it sucked too. Like, I think the part that was difficult for me too, though, was realizing that, because that shows is I think that um like pre Jade PE, that was probably one of the best shows that I've seen and have been a part of, right? And so everybody did such an amazing job. You have people that had like 8-minute performances, uh didn't stumble once, or at least it didn't seem like it. And I'm just over here like, you know, seconds. I'm like, man, I ruined this.
But
Like,
you didn't,
you
did you?
didn't. They
no,
thought it was perfect. They didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah, and that's something that we're gonna talk about later too. It's like,
They don't know.
yeah. So that was my first experience with PE. There's another one that's more recent. When was it? I think this was the spring of 2018. So like right before you came to CSUN, JD. It was our first year, Sam, in grad school, and we were performing in the hallway. And I wrote this piece, and at this point, I had like developed my style to what it is now, right? So like I wrote a really long performance. It was 2.5 pages long. It was just a super big performance, right? And it's that thing where I always like you said, like I'm always pacing in the hallway because like that's just how I rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
um like I separate myself from everybody else and just do my own thing. And it's my turn, and I go up, and it's this performance sort of moves a little bit across the hallway, like we did with another one of our shows that we did together, right? But not the entire way. And so it's my turn, and I go up, and I forget the first line. Like I can remember every
Oh
other line, but I
no.
forget my first line. And I'm looking around because that was part of the performance. Like I was supposed to be looking around all like scared, and I was like, you know what?
That guy's really believable.
Yeah. And then I purposely just like walked up in front of the audience because they were sitting on chairs in the hallway. So like the stage is even smaller because they were like literally in your face, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I go up to them, and the department chair is there. All these like ex-members from P, Casey was there. All these other people were there, and I'm just like going up to them, just staring them straight in the face, all scared. And I purposely did that, and then I walk away with intention because I completely forgot everything. And I go into the classroom, the black box room, where we usually have our PE classes, and some members are still there because they're backstage, right? Or they're off stage, and they look at me and they're like, "Wait, is your piece over already?" Because it was their turn. And I was like, "No, I just forgot my lines." And so I quickly opened up my phone, opened up Google Drive, opened up my document, read the line, went back out, and continued performing everything. And I didn't even bother looking at the rest of the lines, and so I was kind of freaking out. I was like, "Wow, I should have looked at everything else." So when I went up there, I said the first line again, and I guess it's just like brought everything back. Like I memorized, like I remembered everything else, but yeah, I forgot that first line. And again, I got that feeling of like just heat covering.
Yes, yes.
And you know how sweaty I get. Like JD, you and I
Me
are
too.
yeah, we're
Yes.
Yeah,
sweating.
you guys are sweaty.
And this performance was in the spring, so like for
Oh my
anybody who doesn't
God.
know, the building's made out of like glass, right? So it's just like
Oh, with those shining through the windows, the in the
Mm.
yeah,
Manzanita.
yeah.
Oh
And
no,
it feels even hotter. It's spring and like 90 degrees, and
it's like New Orleans all over again.
yeah, it was so bad. And I was like, oh man, how do I always do this? Yeah, that was it. Those are two examples I had.
And you lived. That's what's cool about both, your guys' stories is that you live, right? It feels like the
Mhm.
end of the world at the moment. And life just goes on, and you learn from it, and tomorrow is another performance. That's one of the cool things about live performance, I would suggest, and tell me what you guys think, versus the way PE and a lot of theater now has to be, is online, because you can certainly edit something. I don't think things are typically live online, although they could be. but just that feeling of like what you're watching, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to like a Cirque du Soleil show, for example, and you see somebody up on the high wire, like, I'm watching this live and something dangerous could happen. And that's the thing with live theater, I think. Anytime something could happen that is unpredictable and unplanned. And that, in a way, is what gives it its energy. And then, you know, feeding off the energy of the audience, too. I was in a show at UCLA, and it was not a great musical. And I was the bad guy. I was the heavy. And it was a Rodgers and Hammerstein show, which nobody knows. It's called Me and Juliet. It's like, it's just not a very good show. And it actually has a lot of regurgitated themes from other shows that were hits. Anyway, so I'm the bad guy. If you ever saw Oklahoma, and this is like Judd in New York, okay, that was me. So I had this one solo song, and this last note was just super high, and I was losing my voice, wasn't really singing properly, and a lot of my lines were screamed. And so at the end of this song, it's just me on this stage in the Frood, which, you know, holds maybe 1,000 people. No, it seemed like 1 million people. And I go to hit that high note and nothing was coming out.
Oh,
it was a croak. And I come off stage, and you know you really tanked it when everyone, including all the, you know, the people, you know, running the curtains and everything, they're patting you on the back saying, it's okay. You know you really bumped. Oh, it was a terrible moment. Yeah.
oh,
Man.
that's an awful feeling.
Terrible.
Especially when it's singing, it's even worse.
And there's no going out like, I meant to sing this note or whatever. It just was obvious.
You can't just like come up with another line.
No.
Or, you know, you're just
I couldn't do a Fernando.
that note is murdered. Yeah. R.I.P. to the note.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the note, man. Every other performance, I sang a low note. I sang a lower note.
You're like, I'm not even gonna tenor this. We're going bass.
You've got that right. So, anybody watching, if you've ever been in a performance, I'm sure you have your own stories. And if you're in performance ensemble, you probably have stories like this too. So, all right, let's see then how to extrapolate this into a bigger framework, shall we? So we know that life, as we were talking before we hit record, think to borrow the Shakespearean phrase, you know, life is a stage. And so how about in life when things do not go right, which is all the time, meaning we make our plans, right? What does John Lennon say in a song? Life's what happens when we are busy making other plans. And so, and I don't think any of us would say, don't make plans, don't shoot for things, don't have, but just like in improv, just like in recovering on stage, you got to recover in life too. So are there moments that you can think of, Sam, where that just by necessity, I mean, that had to happen. You were thinking you were going one way and life just kind of turned you around and you said, okay, I'm going to make the most of this new direction.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a kind of funny. Yes, the other day, as I was just showing you before we hit record, I have a lot of plants now. And the other day, I looked in one of our new plants that my roommate got from some lady gave it to him from her garden. And I go over to it and I was like, these flowers, there's no more flowers on it. Like they're falling off. Like, have they been eaten off? And I realized the plant is infested. It is infested with pests, these little mite things. And I just freak out. And I have other plants around it. And I'm like, are they on my other plants? And so I look and they are, but they're not infesting the other plants yet, but it was just like, I've never seen anything like that before. It's nothing I had experienced yet. So, and neither had my roommate. So we went into panic mode and we're freaking out and we were like, oh my God, like, what do we do? Do we have to throw away our plants? Like we're so attached to them. They're like our children. Like, what do we do? Like, so just like didn't expect that, but then I went down to my landlord, who I'm pretty close with, and I was just like, she'll know better. She'll know better. And then I was like, let's remain calm. I'm going to go down there and Lisa will have the answer. And she did. She was like, oh, you don't have to get rid of your plants. Just brush those things off. They're harmless. Go to Lowe's and get some pesticide. And I use this anecdote just because this is how I've learned to deal with things when really like worse things would happen to me before. I've learned to just remain calm and accept everything at all costs. You know, accept the
Wow.
situation at all costs. And that's where I feel like the clarity comes in.
That's
And,
profound, I think.
you know?
I was in a therapy session once where the therapist said to this group, when something happens, it's neither good nor bad until you attach meaning to it, right?
Yeah.
And there was a phrase, by the way, in that therapy session that I learned that I've kept because I think, because I have to remind myself not to do it. It's called catastrophizing.
Yes.
Don't decide, and it is a decision, isn't it?
It's a choice.
Don't decide this is a catastrophe. And I love what you said and how you learned to deal with this. By the way, sorry, fuck you to that person who gave you this infested plant. Sorry.
I don't.
So mean.
What's crazy though is I think I would say that, but I think she didn't know because
I know,
it wasn't
I'm
infested.
kidding.
I know, but
mean,
it was such a beautiful plant.
What am I going to do with this plant that's got all these bugs in it? I know. Huh?
Let's just place it in the little
Like
studio
this?
apartment. Yeah. Let's attack the young and healthy.
Yeah, let's give her a little life lesson to deal with. See how she comes out.
They actually gave it to my roommate. He works at Starbucks, and this lady, she was wearing a garden hat, and he was like, "I like your hat," and she was like, "It's my garden hat." And he was like, "Oh, I have plants," and she was like, "Do you want a plant?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then she brings this giant, beautiful, succulent flower. And we had
just
it here.
Imagine being her and how crappy she feels if she knew that this is anyway.
If she knew.
Right.
Anyway.
But I love the life lesson thing. Now, Fernando, I know you, Sam, and about to be me when I graduate. You guys had certain plans probably when you first entered grad school, and then plans that now have become your new reality after you got your degree. So, Fernando, what do you do with this when something comes at you because you've made this plan and you've taken out your loans or whatever, and I'm going to go do this and I'm going to become this, and then life just spins you around? So is that a good example of such things happening, or are there better ones?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good example, and it kind of does tie into something else that I wanted to mention. I think like everybody in this room, like we all went to community college, right? So for me, so there's like two experiences that I feel like I've learned a lot about. Like life's just taking you for a detour when you have plans, right? And like I originally, when I wanted to go to college, I didn't want to go to a community college, right? But the plan was to go to a 4-year. And for a handful of reasons, one being economical and the second being something that was completely out of my control, I wasn't able to do that. And I ended up in a community college where I spent 3 years before I transferred out, and then did 2 years at CSUN to get my BA. It wasn't until I got into the grad program that I was able to sort of be content with what was happening. Like it took me so long to forgive certain people that were partially the reason why I wasn't able to go to certain universities. It took me that long to be okay with myself and knowing that, like, yeah, I went there, that's fine. This is the path that I took. It's I thought it was always like a lot longer than most people, but like it took me 1 year more to finish school than it did for other people. And I'm like, that's nothing. Like 1 year is nothing. We live for so long that 1 year means nothing, you know? Um, and like stepping into the grad program, obviously, like I stepped in wanting to teach. Like that was the plan. Like I immediately went in knowing that I wanted to teach. I knew that I wanted to teach performance. I knew that I wanted to teach public speaking. And the goal is to like direct an ensemble, right? Like that's my dream. And after graduation, a lot of things just didn't happen that way. Sam and I were roommates for like nearly a year after we graduated, and so we experienced a lot of those things together. And it was a lot of like me coming home feeling really defeated because like I was living off of my savings and paying rent with my savings and paying for, whatever I had to pay for. And I would tell, I was like, oh look, all these people got classes to teach, and I didn't get anything. And I was just like come home really defeated to her. Like I would show her on my phone, like, oh look, I didn't get anything. And it's like, well, what do I do now? Because I need to pay rent and I can't afford rent anymore. And so I just like, I really do have a bad tendency to freak out every time something happens. Right? Like I haven't learned how to cope with that or how to figure that out. But like I freak out and like try to find a million different things that I could do, and like would immediately start doing all of them, even though I can just like sit down and take a deep breath and figure it out. And so I started working at all these other jobs, and last minute I ended up getting a class to teach. And then I just thought to myself, I was like, if I would have waited, I could have just done that. But I couldn't have. Like I think I needed to. And this is something that Sam, like you told me a lot. It's like everything that I did, I needed to go through. Like getting all these different jobs, I needed to go through that. I needed to have those experiences. Waiting literally till the last weekend before the semester starts before getting a class is something I needed to go through. And obviously with the like ongoing pandemic, everybody's life's changed, right? And so I went from teaching a full load of classes and being really good financially and getting my cat and traveling and doing all these things, and suddenly all of that is like taken away, obviously for good reasons, but like it was taken away. And it's just like, well, what do I do now? Because then I moved out to LA and I found an apartment that was kind of expensive, and it's just like, how do I pay for this? Because it's the exact same thing over again. I'm living off of my savings. I can't afford it anymore. I need a job. And that's exactly what I did. It's like I applied to over 400 jobs in that time, like in a time of like 2 weeks. It's like I applied to 400 jobs. In fact, like a lot of the websites blocked me from applying because I applied so much they thought I was a bot. And um
Are you a human?
yeah,
Are you a bot? Like
Right.
400?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please click on the buses in this picture.
guys, yeah, I had so many. I also had like 24-hour bans from, like I couldn't use Indeed for 24 hours on multiple occasions. I
Man.
thought I was
You're banned.
yeah. um but yeah, it's just like those are things that are maybe you think of them as negative experiences, or you feel them to be negative experiences, but like you just had to go through those things. And maybe some of those things weren't your choice, they just happened to happen, but they did, they happened, and you can't really do anything else. And I think that in the same vein of what you said, JD, that things don't have meaning, on like things aren't bad until you attach those meanings to them. Like I agree with that. Like I've never thought about it that way until right now that you said it. But the other thing to me too though is the things that have happened no longer exist, right? Like there's nothing physically that exists of those things. Like they are already the past. Every single word that you're saying already ceases to exist. Like the things that you do and say die as you say them and do them, right? And so it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? I'm still existing and I can't go back. I can only go forward physically, right? Because we haven't figured out how to time travel. At least we don't think we have. And so it's like, okay,
Like,
well, yeah, like let's just stop for a second and think what I want to do and just figure a way to work my way to get there. Granted, it's harder now because everything's just so much different, but I don't know, like those are some of the things that you learn, that when you trip up in your plans, um, that it's fine. I think that when you do plan things, when you do, um, I don't know, like if we're talking about it like in terms of performance, like if you have something drawn up, you have to account for messing up, right? It's like going on a road trip. Like you don't plan the road trip's going to be 8 hours. You say 8 hours plus whatever amount of time we're going to use to stop for gas or stop to go to the bathroom or get something to eat, right? Like you have to account for those things, and I think that's a part of it, right? And the same thing applies to on stage.
I
I
love
would,
that you said that life is full of detours. Go on, JD. I just
yeah,
love
yeah, yeah. Just to kind of build on what you guys are saying, I feel like with in regards to performance, in regards to being artistic and artistic expression, you can get yourself, and I'm going to say I got myself into trouble because I fixated on only one manifestation of what being an artist or an artistic expression could be. I was 18 and I was, chosen from out of Chicago to get this movie work for the Columbia Pictures, and they were going to train me to be a movie star, I thought. And so when that did not happen, when that fell apart, I thought I didn't know what Plan B would be, but now I can say, if you have any artistic ability or any artistic sensibility, you have to, and I'm talking mostly to me, so I'm not preaching as if you bad people, I'm saying me when I say you have to let the artistic part of you manifest itself in any way it wants to. It could be when you were younger, hearkening to something you just said, Fernando, maybe it did manifest itself in a strong way yesterday, last year, 5 years ago. That does not mean it's confined to that. That's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of creativity. It is not in a box. It does not exist in a box. As soon as you try to confine it, it goes somewhere else. And so for me, the big life lesson that I've had to learn, and I've had a few detours in my life, is that if I want to maintain any sensibility, yeah, you got to feed yourself. Let's just say, I used to have this bohemian notion that, to be a starving artist was a great thing. That's all bullshit, because you want to eat, you want to have a place to live, and you want to take care of yourself, be responsible for yourself. However, that means that you have to still nurture, just like salmon plants. You have to be able to nurture the artistic side too. And you might feel like, I'm so consumed with just getting a job or getting a place to live. But you have to water that other plant all the time, because that gives you a sense of living, right? Otherwise, you're just going through the motions of, you might as well be a robot, right? You might as well be a bot. I'm just getting up, going to work, coming to home, watch TV, go to sleep. And I'm not trying to judge people. I'm just saying, if you want to have, if you've had a visitation from the artistic goddess, and she says, I really like, I'm going to give you this little gift and let it just go where it takes you. Enjoy that. I really got stuck with, it can only manifest itself in a certain way. And I missed out on, I'm trying not to anymore, but I missed out on years of possible other manifestations that could have been. And I'm just trying not to miss out anymore. Be open to that. And I think that's the key to creativity on stage, certainly, to be open to the moments. If you just by rote, and Sam, I know you and I have done a lot of plays. So if you just memorized your lines, stood up there, said them, and left, you might as well just go to a play reading or watch robots pretend to be actors. But what happens is real moments happen. And being open to those, I was in an acting class one time, and the very first day he said to me, Jefferson, you are the actiest actor I've ever seen. And I was heartbroken, but I know what he meant. I knew how to deliver my lines, mechanically. I could hit my marks and deliver my lines, but there was no spirit, no passion, no life there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's the key to living, I think, is, yeah, you got to take care of business. We're not children. We have to be able to pay our rent and whatever, but don't let the creativity die. Water it and then watch where it takes you. And that's been probably my biggest life lesson as far as creativity and keeping it in my life.
I resonate with that a lot, Jeff, because I've had a big switch from a very, very low point to very, very high happy point in my life, and it had a lot to do with nurturing my creativity in all ways, because I was kind of set on one way, and it's like I wasn't willing to put the work in. I wasn't working out, but I started doing other things. Like I just started doing what might make me happy, like started baking, started gardening, started making jewelry, and even any like down to the smallest meal, I'll try to make it art, and that's not my plan. That doesn't have anything to do with my end goal in the future. I don't even think about that anymore, but because it's all about the present moment, at least for me. But I feel healthier rather than just focusing on manifest. Like, I think it's very important that you said that, like, manifesting one form of creativity, one thing. You'll hit a roadblock, and I think everything just flows together if you just really let it all free in any way it wants to. You let your creativity guide you rather than trying to control it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And so for anybody that's watching too, I don't know if you've ever, and I'll ask you, Fernando, too, if you ever fall into the trap of thinking, well, creativity means I'm people pleasing, meaning, okay, if I get applause, that means that it's right. Versus, I feel this sense of I want to do this thing or that thing, and if nobody's there to notice it, if no one's there to go, good job, like, could you write something, Fernando, and could it feel fulfilling because you got it out on the page and it's exactly what you wanted to say? And yeah, it feels great to have someone hear it, right? But is it tied to, I'm just saying that, I'm confessing to you that this was more, and I'm sparked by what Sam just said, not putting in the work. I fell in love with the idea of being a star versus being an artist. I think there's a big difference, right? And so one is just like, I just want the trappings of fame versus I'm going to work hard. Oh, look, I'm famous, but I'm just going to keep working. I think that's probably, Fernando, do you agree there's a difference between like really following the art and then waiting for someone to give you, like these, it's two different motivations, I think.
Yeah, it like that. So like I said, I think like when I was listening to everything that both of you were saying, I was trying to take mental notes, but also listen, because this is what I love about the conversations, that they spark a lot, right? Like it just makes you want to say more and ask more and just like be more curious. But to that, I wanted to say that this relates a lot to both my experiences with what you said about being an artist versus sort of chasing this idea of stardom. And then also how this relates to a lot of what maybe the newer members of the ensemble might be experiencing with everything being online, right? And so like the first thing that and this might be long-winded too, so I'm sorry about that, but the first one is the whole idea of performing for the sake of wanting to dive into your art, right? To sort of fester in your own creativity and art and artistry versus trying to like chase something. And I bring that up because last week when we spoke to Mark, our guest last week, we were talking about sort of the differences of like performing on stage and how that changed for him because he had to do it online mid-semester because of the whole lockdown. And I told him, and like you probably remember this too. So I was like, I told him, it's like when I perform, like whenever I write something, I never write it for other people. I write it for me because these are my experiences, right? Like these are my stories. And I know that somebody in the audience might resonate with it because typically there is. And I also know that geographically speaking, I am in an area where a lot of people may have had similar experiences. And even though I don't write for other people, I know that one of my goals as a performer is to have a reaction. It doesn't have to be good, right? Like if I get criticism, I'll take that because that only makes me a better artist. It makes me hone my skills better as an artist, right? And I think I brought up the example about how I wrote on gentrification in Echo Park, and a student got really upset with me. They're like, well, it's not just white people doing it, it's also brown people. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But I chose to write about this, not that. And if I want to talk about that, I will. But that's important to talk about too, and somebody will. Like, that has a place in time, and somebody will talk about it, and it'll be performed, right? Or when there is good feedback, and I gave the example of when we performed Caged Bird, that when I said this particular line about me growing up and seeing these my peers, right, like my brown peers, fight the only black student and not doing anything about it, and then finding that I couldn't step in and help them, there was an audible reaction. Drew responded to it by gasping a little bit, and I heard it because his voice is recognizable, and I was like, this is why I love performing. It's like, nobody's treating me like a star. I don't care about that, right? I mean, just like the mere thought of idolatry, of idolizing somebody, sickens me. Like, that's disgusting to me. Like, I don't care for that. But yeah, like, you perform because you want to be an artist, but you also perform because you have specific goals. And my goal is to move people, right? Whether that moves them to critique my art, I welcome it. If it moves them to make a weird sound while witnessing a performance on stage, I welcome that. Like, that's just a part of it, you know, it's a byproduct. And I think it's something that you have to be aware of. And then moving on to what it means for current performers, it's like, you know, you really have to think about what you're doing, because you're right. Like, you don't know if anybody's going to show up and watch it, because you can't even see your audience anymore, right? Your audience is just a number in the form of total views counted. Like, that's your audience. Like, it's just a statistic. You don't even know who they are. And you perform not to get views, right? Like, when we do this podcast, I don't think any of us cares for, oh, we got X amount of views. We really don't. Like, we're just having a conversation. I think that I looked at the views the very first week and stopped after that. Like, I haven't checked views since then. And I think that for the new performers, that's something that they either already know, or it might be something that they might struggle with, right? Because it is a performance ensemble, because we are geographically next to LA, close to the idea of Hollywood, you do have a lot of people that come over here to be actors. I know that was initially part of your experience, Shitty, that you came over here because you were trying to act on film, right? A lot of members of P have been like that too. And so you come over from this sort of side of performance. It's a little bit different than performing on stage or performance art, right? And so it's, I don't know, I think that when you go into this, you always have to make that distinction. Like, am I doing this for my own artistry, or am I doing this to become a star, right? And there's a difference between both of those, like you said. And I think that's something that the members now have to deal with a lot more, because everything is online. And so, like, you completely lose that sort of, I think there's something about having a person there that really keeps you in check, because it forces you to think about things more, right? It's like, I have an audience member, cool. Does that mean that they're here because they like what I do, or are they here because they're interested in what we might possibly offer them, right? Or we're interested in their stories. And so it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to me, you know, like, it's so complicated, but in a good way. But yeah, that was my really long-winded answer.
I love that answer. So I can see that I don't know how long, I forget. It's been 7 weeks, bro. So I can't remember
Look at
how
the
long
format.
this is supposed to be. Are we, because I'm thinking about an hour is probably, a good length of time. So let me just ask you, Sam, and I'll ask you then, Fernando, after. As we wrap up our time together and thinking about this thing about making mistakes and on stage or in life, Sam, do you have any other thoughts about that you haven't been able to say yet?
Yeah, I think I just want to say that no matter what, I think we're all going to experience everything. And so when something happens, like a bump in the road, or you make a mistake, a blooper, or something doesn't go as planned or as expected, that if that wasn't going to happen at that moment, it would happen later. But now you know, now you know how to navigate that problem. And that's the only reason I brought up my plant example. It was literally 2 days ago, and I probably had way more juicy stories I could have shared, but I just really believe it's so important to just know that, so that you know that you come out, because some people don't make it, right? Like we said in the beginning, like, you know, like you come out of it, you survive it, and you can navigate it better now, and you can be happy and at peace and just remain calm is what I have to say.
I love that. And especially, you know, something you had said earlier too, if it was meant to be that you go through some things like this, let's face it, we can't control circumstances. We just can't. And so this is going to happen. It's invariably going to happen to all of us. And again, I like what you're saying, Sam, as far as like, just, I'm paraphrasing. So if I'm not paraphrasing correctly, please correct me. But, you know, embrace all of those experiences. Whatever life is bringing, embrace it as an experience, because those experiences are going to certainly teach you something, and be open to what those lessons might be. Is that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So, Fernando, what do you think? Any last thoughts about this, about combining the ideas of what we're talking about to our performance ensemble members and others, people who watch are just watching because they like us? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
The things that happen on stage that are mistakes, things that happen in life that could be mistakes. What do you, any last thoughts about that?
Yeah, really, I guess just like really quick that I think that every aspect of performance, and this obviously includes making mistakes, not only serves as a life lesson, but I think that it also serves as something more philosophical, right? Like it goes beyond just mere aesthetics. Like it isn't just performing for the sake of performing. It's also something that can change your life. And sort of like Sam said, like mistakes will happen. It doesn't matter when they happen, right? They might have happened already, or they'll happen again. Or they'll happen at some point in the future, and it doesn't matter. I think that the most important thing to get out of it is that when you do make a mistake, understand that it is something that has to happen, you know? And understanding that and refusing to live in a state of denial will one, and I'm getting a lot of this just from conversations that I had with Sam, that it like really, it truly frees you, right? Both as a person and as an artist and as somebody who's just trying to learn and grow as a person. And that any mistake that you do make, it will sort of flourish into something else that's a lot more beautiful, right? I think that making that mistake of forgetting my entire script the first time around 5 years ago could have completely scared me off, and it didn't. And instead I came back, and now I write performances that are 3 pages long, right? And the other thing was only a paragraph. And so like, you can learn from it. I think that you always have to make sure that you never deny the fact that mistakes will happen, right? Or say that you don't learn from it. Like, you will. And I think it seems kind of crazy to think about it, but it is a life lesson. I think a lot of what performances is teaching you about life. And so that's sort of how, you know, making mistakes on stage and in life and just learning from it all just ties together, is that it will always flourish and you will always push forward regardless of what happens.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, something you were saying, Fernando, as far as that's concerned, like when we talk about making mistakes, I think we're all in agreement here that they're going to happen. There's some people that approach life with trepidation, and so they're afraid to make a mistake. That fear and trepidation does not prevent mistakes from coming. They will still come. So why not unleash your full energy into the world? Wow. Go after things and make big mistakes. They're going to come no matter what. So embrace that. And then something, Fernando, you said too that I wanted to just tag on to, which was, you know, the distinction between trying to be a star and trying to be, express your artistry. And you are correct. When I first came out here, I wanted to be a star. And unfortunately, that made me an asshole. And this is what I mean by that. You're looking for anything and everything that's only going to benefit you. How do I get the role? How do I shine? If there's a scene, how do I steal the scene? We've seen these kind of actors, and it ruins the art I had a great director once who said, because I got the second leading role and I was pissed. And so opening night, I'm trying to steal every scene. We hit intermission. He walks up to me and says, Jefferson, what are you doing? And I go, oh yeah, you're right. I calmed the fuck down. I embraced my role in the show, and the show was a hit. So my point being, and this is what I loved about Performance Ensemble, you wanted everybody else to shine, and by doing so, you all shine. And I hope, dear Performance Ensemble people, that's your attitude as you embrace this semester, even with its limitations. My only advice would be to be as authentic as possible. As Fernando said, you don't get the immediate feedback, right, of the audience. But the more real and authentic you give of a performance, trust me, they will feel it with you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I want to thank my awesome co-hosts. And these kind of conversations, we're just so happy to bring them to you. If you enjoy them, you know, share them with somebody. Call somebody up. Call your mother. No, call a friend. And if you could think of anybody, here's a little to-do, okay, as we're leaving you. Here's a little to-do. Think of a fellow artist. Call them up and just say, I see your artistry. Encourage them. Give them a word of encouragement, because God knows those artists, we need it. So we encourage you, we celebrate the artistry in you. Thank you so much for joining us.